Well, Hank, thank you for coming by and talking about your book, The AIG Story, and a heck of a story it is. Before we get to the book itself, you 5 years ago, when you were 82, said you're going to live to 102. Do you have a vegan?
Did I say that?
You did indeed.
I'm not commenting on that.
The first part of the book tells the fascinating story of how you built what was a relatively small company into the largest insurer in the history of mankind. IPO 300 million, 180 billion cap when you left, and a height of 230, I think.
Right.
For that 700-fold increase. Let's just go through some of the quick things and how you did it. Small things. No more drink-heavy lunches.
That's correct. When I first got in the insurance industry, it was very common. People go out at lunch and have 2 or 3 martinis or whatever. And how do you underwrite risk after you've been drinking at lunch? And I thought that was a bad policy. And so I changed it.
AIG became famous for taking on risks or going in areas where others feared to tread, among others, officers and directors, insurance, and the like. Explain a little bit your philosophy there, going where others didn't.
Things change all the time. And the insurance industry was very, very staid. Yeah. They wrote automobile and homeowners, and some property insurance. But most of the larger risk went to London at the time, and to Lloyd's. And brokers couldn't find a U.S. company that really understood large risk underwriting. And the average company was writing automobile homeowners. They'd argue at the end of the year why they didn't do better. The underwriting department would blame the agency department and vice versa. I thought that was a silly way of doing it. And we scrapped all that, got rid of all that type of business that the company had been writing, and created what I call the profit center. One person in charge of everything, like a small company. So at the end of whether it's a quarter or a month, you know who was responsible. And he or she knew who was responsible. And so there was no blaming anybody else. They either rose to the challenge or they didn't. And most did, I would say. We picked unusual people who were not trained in the historic way of the insurance industry. And we were more creative. We saw the changes that are taking place. Directors wanted D&O insurance. And I went to London and found a syndicate that had been writing it. They were the only ones who had been. I spent time with them. I brought a couple of people from our company over. They spent a few weeks there, and we came back and started underwriting directors and office liability insurance. And things like that. We just looked for the unusual things that no one else was clogging the market in. So we got adequate pricing for what we were trying to do. And we did it quite successfully.
Simple things. You mentioned fire insurance deductibles.
Yeah.
Why was that such why didn't they never thought of that before?
You wonder why. Yeah, they wrote $1. So you're getting losses for $500 or $1,000. The cost of handling it was greater than the loss. So we put deductibles in. I took a lot of grief over that.
It's amazing. Obviously, your biggest fame is overseas.
Yeah.
And breaking into unbreakable markets. Insurance was thought outside of, say, of London as a home market.
That's right.
Can you go over how you broke into Japan and Korea, which didn't allow anybody in to do anything?
Well, it wasn't easy, and it took a while. The U.S. itself did not believe in trade and services. We only traded goods. And I was on the President's Advisory Board for trade negotiations, actually with many presidents.
Well, that's an area that, again, like deductibles, the idea that trades that services aren't trade.
That's exactly right. And that meant banks, credit card companies, insurance companies were foreclosed out of many markets. So I had to start back here, trying to get support for that. And I must tell you, it took years to get support independent of that, we were opening markets around the world. And Japan was very difficult. I mean, you wouldn't believe some of the things that they put up as arguments against it. And but we ultimately we cranked the door open.
How did you wear them down?
Well, we were going to retaliate, and that got their attention, and we had a couple of good SDRs. Charlene Barshevsky was very good.
Mm-hmm.
Carla Hills was terrific, and
she served on your board, didn't
yeah,
she? Carla
yeah,
Hills?
she was very good. When she left the government, of course, it took a long time, but we introduced products that they hadn't been doing. The Japanese. So after we began doing that, they wanted to get into the same markets that we had opened in Japan, and threatened that they will not let us into their own markets, their home market for the traditional kinds of coverages, but they were going to come into what we call the third sector. We broke that down. It took years. We broke that down. And we really changed the world of insurance in Japan. Korea was even as tough, if not tougher. It took years. It took years to open the market. But in the meantime, we were opening other markets. We were opening markets all through Southeast Asia, all the ASEAN countries, Eastern Europe. We were behind the Iron Curtain before the Iron Curtain came down, with Hungary, Poland, and Romania. So, and then Latin America, Star had dabbled there. They had nothing. We built that up. So we were in 130-odd countries when I left the company.
In the case of countries like Japan and Korea, how did you overcome your American background when selling? It's a very hidebound market.
Well, yeah, but we weren't selling a lot of individuals except for a couple of new products that we introduced. We introduced, for example, some limited forms of hospitalization insurance and travel insurance, which they hadn't even thought of before. So we opened markets with easy products. And then when Japanese companies began to operate overseas, we followed them. We provided insurance that their own companies couldn't follow them with because they weren't entered in those countries. And so we were there to receive them. And we built relationships in Japan, of course, and in Korea. And I knew a little bit about Korea, having spent a little over a year there.
Being a war hero.
Yeah.
China, what was?
Yeah. Well, China was different.
You had history with China.
We had a history in China. I first went in 1975. It was like another planet going then and now. And I became friendly with then Zhu Rongji, who was mayor of Shanghai, and helped him create an International Business Advisory Council, which is even in existence today. It's a very prominent and very, very much desired organization for a foreign company to be admitted to that organization. And we built the first big hotel office complex in Shanghai called the Shanghai Center. At that time, it was in 1992 when it opened. It was the largest, tallest building in Shanghai. Now it's about number 80. Shows how things have changed. But it took me from 75 to about 90 to get the insurance license. I worked hard at it. I worked hard at it and did a lot of things to help China.
AIG would help infrastructure projects in countries to show that you're part of the
We
home
created an infrastructure fund in different parts of the world. And Moeen Qureshi, he had been acting Prime Minister of Pakistan, was in the World Bank. A very good man, and he ran it for me. And we raised money from third-party sources, and we built a lot of infrastructure around the world. But we always built, in our life company, we always built a head office building in the country to show permanence in the country.
You had some interesting stories. Can you tell us what it was like, even at a distance, working with Howard Hughes and the Glomar Explorer and the CIA?
Yeah.
Kind of movie stuff.
A little bit was. There was a book written about the Glomar Marine, separate and apart from in my book, a real book. A Russian sub went down in the Northwest Pacific. The Russians were looking all over for it, couldn't locate it. We knew exactly where it was, and we wanted to recover it. The technology that they had, it was a nuclear sub. We wanted the code books. So it was a project that the CIA undertook. So there was a meeting in my apartment in New York with the general counsel of the agency and Howard Hughes as deputy. And the idea was to build a vessel. It had to be private, it had to be a private company doing this. To build a vessel big enough that could lift a sub by 2 big winches in its hold and then deposit it someplace where you can take it apart. Well, there was a lot of things that they wanted us to provide the insurance for this operation, which we did. We rated it. And when the sub was being lifted, the Los Angeles Times broke the story. I happened to be in Hong Kong with my board and had a call that there was, the story had broken. They didn't know what was going to be said, but they were alerting me to it. It was too bad that they did that, because it came out later that half the sub broke off. And of course, any code books would be changed.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not we learned anything in technology, I don't know. We returned all the bodies, though, to the Russians.
Talk about rescues. Briefly describe Iran.
Yeah.
And the Shah fell, and Mr. Shabani, what you did to...
Well, Casey Shabani was an Iranian American. He worked for me for years, lived in California. When David Rockefeller took, when the Shah was alive, was asked to take a small group on financial services to hold some meetings in Tehran. The outcome of that was a joint venture insurance company that we had organized. It was quite successful. We became the largest insurance company in Iran in about 3-4 years. When the Shah fell, they picked up Shabani right away, accused him of being in the CIA, and that I was the Mideast director for the CIA. And they imprisoned him in a very high secure prison. There were no assets in the United States that could be of help. Every agency had no way of being assistance. Had their own problems. The embassy,
Right.
People were trapped there for years. And the strange thing was, the automatic telephone service system was not interrupted. I don't think they knew how to interrupt it.
So that's how you could talk to his wife?
We can talk to his wife on almost a daily basis. And we arranged a plan, which best not described. We did not bribe anybody, but we got him out of the high secure prison and out of the country.
So is this going to be the sequel to Argo?
Could be.
Quickly describe trying to give rifles, taking rifles into Hungary.
Yeah, well, we were operating behind the Iron Curtain, and we got to know the finance minister of Hungary quite well. He was a big hunter, and he invited us, one of my colleagues, John Roberts, and I, to go hunting with him. And so we bought some equipment to him. You couldn't get equipment in Hungary. We brought some rifles, ammunition, etc. And we were going to land in Hungary. We couldn't. The weather was bad. We landed in Vienna and took a car, which is not very far. And they opened the trunk of the car at the border. They thought we were going to instigate a revolution. We were there for hours, had to get the finance minister down to the border to vouch for us. I'm glad he came. I might still be there.
You had an interesting tete-a-tete with Ceausescu about Romania, dictator of Romania, about missiles.
Yeah, this came about, there was a meeting in an organization called UNCTAD, if you remember.
Right.
And there was a meeting in the Philippines. And the theme that I was on was that a stock company was better than a mutual. And the outcome of that was the Hungarian insurance commissioner invited me to come to his country. It was Romania, not Hungary.
Right.
Romania, which I did. And when I landed, I was whisked off to see the head of state, Ceausescu. And I walk into this hall in the palace, walk down a huge corridor. There were reporters and photographers on either side, and he's sitting like a king in the throne. And the first question he threw at me is, why is the West pointing missiles at the East? I said, because the East is pointing them at the West. And I didn't come here to discuss missile technology. Came here to discuss insurance. Anyway, this conversation went on, all being recorded. He softened quite a bit after the first dialogue, and we wound up opening an insurance operation in Romania, and I'd go there from time to time. It was a very poor country. He was just an outright dictator, and of course, when things changed, he was assassinated.
Some countries you decided not to go into. Describe what happened in Uganda.
Yeah, well, we had an operation in Uganda, actually, a life operation. It was very small and very mixed bag whether we should be there or not. So I went to visit one of my colleagues, and the American ambassador was hosting a reception on top of the hotel, which had a name that didn't describe really what the hotel was like. And he invited many of the local establishment, including the Minister of Finance and the Foreign Minister, etc. So after the receiving line, it's on the top floor, an open terrace. I walk out with him, and I see the two ministers and their wives over near the railing dropping glasses over the side. And I turned to him and I said, "What do you think they're doing?" He said, "They're trying to hit the people below."
Unbelievable.
Didn't think we should be doing business here.